now at your school, Skip, you don't have any hippies, and you never did you?
Oh, yes, we do.
Do you really?
Oh, well, we have our, yeah, we have some hippies. We have some people.
Well, isn't that a pretty exclusive private school
yes,
here in New York?
Yes, it's extremely difficult to have to come in with a jacket and tie and a rose in your hair. But we did it. I mean, there are some people, we have people that march with the National Liberation Front flag. And we have, we may be a very exclusive school, and we have to watch out, insofar as our total image. But we are built up of a lot of individual people. We have extremes. We have the extreme left, extreme right, and the people just don't know what the hell they're doing.
You do have the extreme right also, then?
We have everything.
All shades of opinion at the Dalton School. Because I was going to say, it seems to me, from having spoken to you in the brief time we've been talking, that even though you're going to a private school, such as the Dalton School, your views really aren't that different from our other two guests.
Well, that's my personal view.
That's your personal view.
I may be the editor of the Daltonian, and the Daltonian may be the Dalton School newspaper, but it sure does not represent everybody's opinion.
Well, of course, I have to admit there's a lot in that. It's like if I live in a suburb, and I certainly couldn't speak for all suburbanites.
I don't even speak for more than half.
So many people. I mean, I can't certainly ask you, Chuck, what about everybody at Columbia? You can certainly only speak for yourself, but as the editor of the Columbia newspaper...
The managing editor.
The managing editor?
There's an editor-in-chief.
Oh, I see. All right. And why isn't he here tonight? As the managing editor of The Spectator, would you feel... Well, you must have been right in the thick of things in the student uprising.
That's right, we were.
And how do you feel it turned out? Do you feel you fellas won?
I don't know. I don't know who us fellas are.
Well, those who were in the uprising.
I feel that a great many good things are beginning to happen. I don't think that many good things have happened yet. I know that not many good things have happened yet, and I don't think many good things will happen if a lot of pressure isn't kept up. Remember we talked earlier about the black people and how what they must do is exert force, perhaps not physical force, but exert sort of even a fear to actually get what they want. And part of Jeff's radical philosophy and stuff is that you have to keep up the pressure and you have to keep it going, or else we're going to go nowhere.
Well, if you'll forgive my naivete, could you spell out exactly what it is that's wanted at Columbia?
It's sort of this, you see, the whole thing about, why the three of us, you find us very similar, is I think all of the young people, at least the young people like us in the United States, are saying, don't say it, do it. The hippies went away and they lived in communes and they loved people and like that. That's what the establishment has been saying. They say you should love people, you should help people who are less fortunate than you are. You should be willing to share what you have. And the hippies are doing it. And the youth of America, when they gripe about the war and they have big demonstrations, are saying, to the people of the establishment, to the older generation, if you will, that you all say you're against the war, you all say you're against racism, yet the war is still going on.
But there must be more to it than that. Now, I think I love people, and I know I'm against the war in Vietnam, and I know I help anybody whenever I can, but I wasn't revolting at Columbia, and I'm not revolting against anything.
Do you see, though, I mean, you get into traps. People get into traps because, like, you edit Marvel comic books, and if your private opinions or your were reflected in Marvel comic books, you'd be in a hot spot, say. Your comics, for instance, build up war and the excitement of a battle and that sort of thing. And it's the exact, you say you're against
Well, no more
Vietnam
so than
War.
your newspaper does. We present war in some stories. We don't try to make it a
Marvel
fun
comics,
thing.
really do, kind of exalt it.
I don't think so.
I don't think. I
think
really.
Marvel
If we
comics-
do, it's unintentional.
I think many a time I read Marvel where the perennial German Nazi officer, the bad man, will come out and say, "What madness is this? He's a man. I'm shooting him." I come across that. It's like it's not just saying, "Okay, war, go out and kill," and okay, we have heroes. This man, I'd say Sergeant Fury. You look at him; he may be exalted, and his commandos may be exalted, but the job they do and why they do
What
it
is
not.
their job?
Their job is to stop men that are annihilating 100,000 Jews or 600,000 Jews in Treblinka.
Mm-hmm.
And they're stopping from doing it when from spreading that. They're stopping men, dictators, they're stopping fanatics that are trying to take over the world. you know, for sheer power-mad people.
Wouldn't you say that fanatic is sort of a relative term?
Relative to who? Anybody I know?
But
I
it's-
mean, relative to what?
Well, I'm sure a lot of people think that members of the New Left are fanatic. A
That's
lot
it.
of people in the South think that anyone who wants absolute equality for black people is a fanatic.
And the liberals think that the people down south, that so many of them, they think of Wallace as a fanatic. You know, I always get a kick out of this use of terms. I've often thought, have you ever noticed when there's a revolution, if the people revolting are the ones whom we consider to be the good guys, we call them freedom fighters. If they're the bad guys, we call them the terrorists. Now, I guess that we're all that way. I guess the people on our side, we can always find a good term for. I've always thought it would be wonderful if we could truly, all of us, be objective. See, I'm afraid, it's unfortunate, I don't know whether it's your youth or what, I don't think you fellas really have the answer, because while I think your objectives are right, I think you don't have the objectivity that is required, which I think will probably come later. You have the zeal that's needed, and you're doing a wonderful thing, and you're not wasting your time cheering at a baseball game. You're trying to make a better world. I don't think anybody can condemn that. But I think when you reach the point where you try to make the better world without stepping on other people, which I think very often you do, then I think we'll really be reaching something.
See, I think you're dealing with a utopia that doesn't exist. I think one of the things that allows crimes to be perpetuated is the myth of the gentleman. Well, gentlemen and polite people create some of the most heinous acts.
No, you people are dealing with a utopia that doesn't exist, because when you talk about going to a commune and living collectively and sharing the wealth and this sort of thing, well, it's patently obvious you can't build a world on this. You can't live collectively. You can't just give things away to everybody. There has to be a little more organization. It's easy for a select group to do that. It's easy for the four of us to go and live in the hills. But if the whole world says we're giving up our jobs and we're just going to do our thing, then you've got no world really, and we'll be right back
do you mean?
to the caveman.
Well, Stan, what you're saying, there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. But is it being objective to live in a segregated white suburb? I have a friend who asks his mother periodically when he wants to get a rise out of her. He says, Mom, why aren't there any black people in Bethpage? And it really drives her out of her mind. Because she knows she's really a good person.
Well,
Like that. But she knows that she's living in this community where there are no black people. And she says, well, maybe no black people ever wanted to move to Bethpage. It's the stock answer she gives it. She goes and gets very upset. As I said a few minutes ago, that it's what you say is important. But the youth in the United States aren't asking whoever's in power to say nice things. They're asking
no,
them
it's
to
not
do nice things.
It's not a case of just saying nice things. I don't think. I think what it is, I think most of us want the same things. I think the younger people feel we want it and we're going to get it and we're going to get it now, and we don't care what has to fall by the wayside. Convention, customs, law, because they're all bad anyway, and they've gotten us into this mess. The older person, I think the older person for the most part realizes this is not perfection, having ghettos and having poverty, certainly not having war, certainly not having all of the ills that the human race has inflicted on it. But the older person says, I would like to solve this, but how can I do it in a workable way?
And
You see?
they say this while sitting in their living room in their segregated suburb.
Well, that's really, I guess, that's human nature. I think the young person always has more drive, and the older person is more complacent. But there has been a lot of progress over the centuries. See, what's
Do you think
happened? Oh, yes.
Do you
Oh,
see
yes.
what I see as a completely different model of what's happening? That the old institutions which hold a society together are disintegrating. And it's not just young people that are upset, but there's a lot of people upset, discontent with how they live. And, I mean, look at one of the basic institutions, like a church. Churches, traditionally in society, defined the morality. They teach people what's right and wrong. But now in this society, in this period, churches have no real relevance. They don't define the ethics. And so I think we're seeing the collapse of old, outdated institutions that grew up out of our old traditions, and the beginning formation of new institutions, because we're a new kind of urban society.
Again, Jeff,
Technology.
I can't really disagree with you, but I think the reason is not because the young people have opened our eyes so much as the fact that due to the change that has come along, due to the increased communications, the expanded communications, I think that the whole world has become more sophisticated, and it's happened very quickly. I don't think you could sell a generation on a war now using the slogan, the war to end all wars, because I think people would know today there's no such thing, and when this war is over, there's going to be trouble again, unless we find a real workable way of stopping it. I think the human race, because of television, I think McLuhan has a lot in what he says. The medium has become so important. It's freed people all over. It's opened their minds. It's expanded their horizons. And what's happened is people are thinking now. People can see the paradoxes which you speak of, and there are many more in the world. There are many. We say one thing, we do another. We want one thing, we settle for something else. Suddenly, these things have become patently obvious because of the nature of the 20th century, because of travel and transportation, which have brought us closer together, because of TV. Why, when I was young, I would go to a movie perhaps once a month, and this was my contact with anything other than the bosom of my family, you see. I might listen to the radio once in a while. Why, today, any youngster, except the poorest imaginable, has a television set, and he sees things by the age of 7 or 8 that I didn't know about or certainly had never seen until I was an adult. It's a different world. This is why I guess that the young people are becoming more aggressive. Maybe they're more aware. The only point, really, that I would like to make is I don't see where it benefits us if, in trying to get new institutions that are better, we tear down the foundations for them. I don't think that you can build a society of better laws by tearing down the other laws.
That's the only way another society is built, is by tearing down the old and building up a new.
You must work on the foundations of what is established, and if the only way of making those foundations
But
is
you
to tear down the establishment. I mean, I'm not advocating go out and kill up all the government officials and let's start all over again. Let's put in who we want. Let's put a hippie in and end the war. Let's put anything, whoever we want. Yes, you are talking more idealistically than I think that you may think that we're talking, well, preferably he.
The trouble is you fellas aren't idealistic enough.
No, you're saying, okay, wait, go through the legislature, the proper channels, and go ahead and get your laws put through. Get your boys out of Vietnam peaceably. Don't step on anybody's toes. Don't break any windows. Don't riot. Now, I can't see how.
But don't you see, my feeling is I'm afraid. Every action has a reaction. My sympathies really are with the liberals. But the minute the liberals get too much power, the minute the liberals get out of line and become too much of a threat, the nation will swing toward conservatism, and the very things I think you're trying to accomplish are apt to be crushed.
There are a couple of things. Liberal is sort of a dirty word in the radical movement. To call someone a liberal, if you happen to be a member of SDS, is like really calling him a nasty thing. A liberal is a person who went to Chicago and cast his ballot for Hubert Humphrey. A liberal is a person who saw kids in the streets really getting beaten savagely, and he's the person who said, well, they were here marching around and they had beards and stuff, they deserved it. That's what a liberal is.
Well, there again, now we have to start redefining terms. I thought of a liberal, obviously, in a different way. In other words, now the thing is to be a radical. To be a liberal is almost to be a conservative, by your definition.
Well, it's the same thing now. It's become the same thing in our country. Those people, let me take a step back. 4 years ago, SDS was organizing in the poor white ghettos, and SNCC, which we all know where Stokely Carmichael went with Black Power and everything. SNCC was organizing poor blacks in Mississippi and in the South, and there was this idea of the interracial movement of the poor, and would win justice. And after battering our heads against a wall and seeing no real progress, we learned this one lesson, and that is measure changes in the society by your own life. That means that for the Negro in Mississippi, the politician would come through and say, look, we passed this wonderful civil rights bill. But the Negro was taught to ask, Well, how did that change my own life?
Jeff,
And it really didn't.
I want to comment on that, and let's come back to that in just one moment after this break. Which is not really what I want to talk about. I don't know if you do, but it was suggested.
We'll talk about it.
Well, gentlemen, we just have a few minutes left, and one more point that people usually have more than a passing interest in is the subject of sex. Now, what about the new morality in this country? Even though hippiedom is dead, I'm sure that the certain different change in morals is still alive. How do you feel, for example, about free love? I assume I can anticipate your answer, but I'd like to hear it.
What do you mean by free love?
Well, about the fact that sex is just sort of for everybody to enjoy, and why make such a big deal about it?
Everybody's always thought that way in church. It's
But
not people. People always wanted to enjoy sex. It was just a taboo. But now that we have the hippie movement, now we're going to say we're actually saying what we've been saying it, but but it was not supposed to be said.
Well, that's it. You feel then that the taboos have been lifted.
Yes, we made such a big thing. People have made such a big thing about free love and all that it's getting to a more liberal life.
Well, is this a universal opinion?
Well, I think one of the things you have to remember, Stan, is that most of the young people, at least the young people that I know, are much less interested in institutions than they are about what these institutions produce. They're much more interested in love and really loving someone, really giving yourself to someone. They are in all kinds of community morality and what they consider to be sort of false codes of morality that are sort of superimposed on them. I don't think that it's any really horrible thing that people are much more interested in personal relationships and in love than they are in institutions.
Well, then you feel that there is a definite change in the morals today, and even though, as we said, hippiedom as such is waning, many of its after effects are lingering on.
Well, I think you can see two things, that people are much more oriented towards having real depth in a relationship. In the old days, people would get married and stay married to this person for 30, 40 years out of duty. They might hate it, and they might never like to sleep with it.
Isn't there more depth to sex being somewhat meaningful and being less casual? If something is casual, can it have as much depth? I mean, if a fella goes
Maybe
from
you
one girl
refine it
to
by
another.
practice.
I don't think what we're talking about is that something being casual. I think what Jeff and I are talking about is something really being meaningful.
I'm not sure you and Jeff are talking about the same
I don't
thing.
think we necessarily are, but I think that we both agree that what people are looking for is honesty and something that is really meaningful.
See, I think that in the urban areas, people make love